The evening air was soft and warm, carrying the scent of jasmine through the sprawling estate. The garden pavilion stood at the very edge of the property, hidden behind hedges sculpted like walls and trees grown tall enough to block the outside world. Few ever went there, for it was said to be a place of secrets, where whispered confessions and stolen glances had lived longer than the flowers themselves. Evelyn walked slowly along the stone path that led to the pavilion. Her heart raced, though she tried to steady it. The note had come that morning, folded neatly in her book when she wasn't looking. Come to the garden pavilion at sunset. Alone. No signature, no clue, only the neat, flowing script that spoke of confidence. She told herself not to go, yet the thought lingered all day until it became unbearable. Curiosity had always been her weakness. The sky was painted gold and rose as she reached the archway covered in vines. She hesitated, one hand resting on the cold stone, the other pressing against her chest as if to calm the wild rhythm of her heart. Who would be waiting for her? Why here? She told herself it might be a trick, a simple prank, but still, her feet carried her inside. The pavilion opened before her like something out of a dream. Lanterns had been lit, hanging from the beams of the wooden roof. Their glow painted the carved pillars in shades of amber, and the reflection danced across the small pond nearby. The flowers, carefully arranged in beds around the edges, seemed to bloom brighter in the lantern light. The place was alive, breathing, humming with something she couldn't name. And then, she wasn't alone. A figure stepped from the shadow of the farthest pillar. He moved with ease, as though he belonged in the pavilion the way the roses did, as though he had been waiting there forever. His eyes caught hers, and she froze, unable to look away. There was something daring in the way he watched her, something that both unsettled and pulled at her. "You came," he said softly, his voice smooth as velvet. "I received your note," Evelyn replied, her words catching in her throat. "I hoped you would," he answered, stepping closer. The lantern light revealed more of him now: broad shoulders, an easy smile that hinted at mischief, and eyes that seemed to see right through her. He stopped just close enough for her to feel the warmth of his presence, though he did not touch her. Evelyn's breath came quicker, and she tried to gather her composure. "You haven't told me why you asked me here." He tilted his head slightly, studying her as though weighing his words. "Because some things cannot be spoken in the light of day. Some truths need the cover of evening, and the silence of this place." The way he spoke left her unsettled, yet curious. She wanted to ask more, but the words tangled in her throat. Instead, she looked away, pretending to study the roses climbing the pavilion pillars. Still, she could feel his gaze on her, steady and intent. "Do you always follow mysterious invitations?" he asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Her head snapped back toward him, a blush rising on her cheeks. "No. But, something about this one felt different." He smiled, as if pleased by her answer. "Perhaps it is because you already knew the writer, even without a name." Her heart skipped at that. Did she know him? She tried to search his face, the curve of his jaw, the set of his eyes. Familiar, yes, but from where? She couldn't place him, and that only deepened the strange pull she felt. The night grew darker, the lanterns glowing brighter. The garden around them was hushed, as though it listened to their every word. Evelyn's pulse quickened, not just from uncertainty but from the thrill of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. He leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice so it brushed against her like a secret. "I brought you here, Evelyn, because temptation should never remain caged. And tonight, you are free to listen to it." Her lips parted, but no sound came. The air between them felt charged, heavy with possibility. She should have turned away, demanded answers, perhaps even left the pavilion altogether. But she didn't. Instead, she stayed, caught in the warmth of the lantern glow and the intensity of his presence. In that moment, Evelyn realized the garden pavilion was not just a place of secrets, it was a place where choices were made. And tonight, her choice would shape everything that followed. The lanterns sway gently in the evening breeze, their golden glow casting shifting shadows across the wooden floor of the pavilion. Evelyn stood in silence, her pulse still uneven from his words. The man before her had drawn her in with nothing more than a note and a look, and she could not decide if she should be cautious or surrender to the thrill rushing through her veins. "You speak as though you know me," she said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. "And yet, I don't even know your name." He smiled at that, a slow curve of his lips that suggested he had been waiting for her to ask. "Names can be masks," he replied. "But if you wish, you may call me Adrian." "Adrian," she repeated softly, testing the sound of it on her tongue. It felt familiar, though she could not place why. "Why me? Why summon me here?" He took a step closer, and though he was not yet within reach, she felt as though the very space between them tightened. His gaze held hers, unwavering. "Because I have watched you," he admitted, his tone gentle, not threatening. "Not in secret, but in passing. At gatherings, in the gardens, among the crowd. You walk as though you are present, but your heart is always elsewhere. And I wondered where that elsewhere was." Her breath caught. She had always thought herself careful, always measured in how she carried herself. Yet this man had seen through her veil in moments she hadn't noticed. "You shouldn't have watched," she whispered. "Perhaps," Adrian said softly. "But once curiosity begins, it is not so easily silenced." Evelyn looked away, her fingers brushing the carved wood of the pavilion rail. The flowers below swayed, their perfume rich in the air. She told herself she should leave, yet her feet remained firmly planted. She told herself not to speak again, yet the words escaped. "And now that your curiosity has brought me here, what is it you seek?" Adrian's expression grew more serious. He stepped forward again, the space between them nearly gone now. "I seek truth," he murmured. "And I seek the courage to show you mine." Her chest tightened as he raised his hand, not to touch her, but to rest it against the pillar beside her. His nearness made the air heavy, thick with unspoken possibility. She could feel the warmth of him, though his fingers never brushed her skin. Evelyn's voice wavered. "And if I am not ready to hear it?" "Then I will wait," Adrian said without hesitation. "But I will not pretend it does not exist." The honesty in his tone startled her more than his words. She had met countless people who smiled, flattered, and hid their intentions beneath layers of politeness. But this man, this Adrian, looked at her as though nothing in the world mattered but her answer. The silence stretched, broken only by the rustling leaves and the soft hum of night insects. Evelyn's heart thudded loudly, and she feared he might hear it. She told herself again to leave, but instead, she asked, "Why the garden pavilion? Why not speak to me in daylight, among others?" Adrian's eyes softened. "Because daylight belongs to duty. To appearances, to roles we are expected to play. But here, in the quiet of the pavilion, no mask is needed. Here, the heart speaks freely." His words struck something inside her, something she hadn't admitted even to herself. How long had it been since she had allowed her heart to speak? How long had she hidden behind composure, behind what was proper and expected? She lowered her gaze, trying to regain control. You speak boldly for someone I've only just met. Do you wish me to stop? He asked gently. The question stole her breath. Did she? Reason told her yes, yet her silence betrayed her. She did not say the word, and in her quiet, Adrian's smile returned soft, knowing, patient. The lanterns flickered as though stirred by an unseen hand. Somewhere beyond the hedges, an owl called into the night. Evelyn felt the world narrow until there was only the two of them, the pavilion, and the tension that pulsed in the space between their unspoken desires. At last, she dared to meet his eyes again. If I stay, she whispered, what will happen? Adrian leaned just close enough for his voice to brush against her like a caress. Then temptation will have its chance. The words lingered in the night air, daring her to decide. Evelyn's fingers tightened against the wooden rail, her body still yet her spirit pulled forward. She knew she stood on the edge of something dangerous, something thrilling. And though every part of her had been trained to walk away, she found herself unable to move. In that moment, Evelyn realized the garden pavilion was no longer just a place of secrets. It had become a place where walls cracked, where truth slipped through, and where temptation's fire waited to be fed. The night deepened around the garden pavilion, and the lanterns glowed brighter, like stars gathered close to earth. Evelyn stood still, torn between retreat and surrender. Adrian's words, low and steady, echoed in her mind. Then temptation will have its chance. Her breath shivered as she whispered, you make it sound so simple. Is it not? He asked, his eyes holding hers. All choices are simple until we fear the cost. Evelyn turned away, her gaze falling on the roses climbing the carved pillars. Their petals caught the golden light, soft and perfect. How many times had she admired them from afar during the day, never daring to step into this pavilion. Now here she was, with a stranger who saw more of her than she had ever allowed. She drew in a breath and said carefully, and if I choose to leave now? Adrian did not move, though his smile was faint, almost sad. Then you will leave, and the night will go on as though nothing happened. But the thought of what might have been will return to you, again and again. The heart does not forget doors it almost opened. His words cut deeper than she expected. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, trying to silence the racing of her thoughts. She had always lived with control, every step measured, every word chosen carefully. But now, in the golden light of the pavilion, that control felt like a weight she longed to set down. When she opened her eyes, Adrian was still there, waiting, patient. He did not push, did not reach for her, but the intensity of his presence wrapped around her like unseen arms. Why me? She asked again, softer this time. There are others more willing, less guarded. Adrian's expression softened. Because I do not want what is easy. I want what is real. And you, Evelyn, are more real in your silence than most are in their endless words. Her chest tightened at his reply. A part of her wanted to laugh it away, to dismiss it as flattery. But his tone was not flattery, it was truth, bare and unpolished. The pavilion grew quiet, save for the faint ripple of water in the nearby pond. The night air was heavy with jasmine, sweet and dizzying. Evelyn's hand trembled slightly as she placed it on the carved rail, grounding herself. Slowly, she turned back toward Adrian. If I take one step closer, she said carefully, I may not turn back. Adrian's gaze darkened, though his voice was steady. Then let the step be yours to choose, not mine to steal. The honesty of that startled her. He had drawn her here, yes, but he would not take what she did not offer. The decision rested with her. And for the first time in years, Evelyn realized how rare that was to be given the space to choose freely. Her pulse thudded as she tested the air between them. One step was all it would take. Just one. She shifted her weight, her slipper brushing against the wooden floor, and before her mind could argue, she moved. The step was small, but its meaning was vast. Adrian's breath caught almost imperceptibly, his eyes fixed on her as though she had just revealed her soul. He did not reach for her still, though the closeness between them was electric. Evelyn felt her own breath quicken, the space between them pulsing with something alive. "I thought you would leave," he murmured, voice hushed. "So did I," she whispered back. Her admission hung in the air, heavier than any silence before. Adrian's eyes searched hers, not with hunger alone, but with something deeper: respect, longing, restraint. The tension of it coiled in her chest, thrilling and terrifying at once. Her fingers twitched at her side. She wanted to lift them, to bridge the last inch that separated them. But fear still clung, whispering warnings of consequences. Yet desire whispered louder, tempting her to risk what she had never dared. "You're trembling," Adrian said softly, his voice edged with concern. "Perhaps," she admitted. But not from fear. Her honesty startled even herself. She had never spoken so plainly, never stripped her words of safety. Adrian's lips curved faintly, his restraint holding firm, though she could see the tension in him too. "Then let temptation guide you, Evelyn," he whispered. "Only for tonight." The words were a key, unlocking something long caged within her. She exhaled slowly, her body leaning ever so slightly forward, testing the boundary she had never crossed. Adrian remained still, patient as stone, though the air around him thrummed with anticipation. And in that suspended moment, Evelyn realized the first step was not just toward Adrian, it was toward herself, toward the hidden part she had buried beneath duty and fear. The garden pavilion had become more than a place of shadows. It had become a mirror, showing her what she desired most. And with that single step, she knew the night would never let her forget it. The air between them grew heavy, charged with a silence that spoke louder than words. Evelyn could hear her own heartbeat echoing in her ears, a steady drum that seemed to match the faint rise and fall of Adrian's breath. That single step she had taken lingered in the space like an invisible bridge, delicate, fragile, yet undeniable. Adrian remained where he stood, his hands still resting against the pillar, his body angled toward her but restrained. His control only drew her closer in spirit. It would have been easier if he had tried to touch her, easier to retreat and blame him. But he didn't. He simply let her exist in the choice she had made. "Why do you stop yourself?" Evelyn whispered, her voice trembling with both nerves and longing. His eyes softened, though his jaw tightened as though holding back an answer. "Because temptation is sweetest when it is chosen. If I reach for you, it is mine. If you reach for me, it is ours." The words sank into her like warm fire. She swallowed, her throat dry, and for a moment she turned her gaze downward, afraid of what he might see in her eyes. The lantern light flickered over the roses and cast patterns across the wooden floor. She traced the shapes with her eyes, anything to steady herself. Adrian's voice came again, low and velvet soft. "Do you feel it too? The pull between us?" Her lips parted, and though she wanted to deny it, she could not. "Yes," she admitted, barely audible. The silence that followed was thick, alive. Evelyn's fingers twitched against the railing, then slowly lifted, as though guided by something outside her control. She reached toward him, hesitating just inches away. Her hand hovered in the air, trembling at the invisible barrier of restraint. Adrian's breath deepened, but he did not move. He waited. His stillness gave her both fear and courage, a strange mix that burned in her chest. Finally, with a fragile breath, Evelyn closed the last inch, her fingertips brushing the sleeve of his coat. The contact was light, fleeting, yet it felt like lightning shot through her hand. Adrian's eyes darkened, his control straining, but he did not seize the moment. He let her touch linger, fragile and trembling. Her hand slid slowly down his arm, tracing the fabric until her palm rested near his wrist. She felt the warmth of his skin beneath, the faint pulse that beat as rapidly as her own. Her breath caught, and she dared to look up into his eyes again. There was no mockery there, no triumph. Only raw intensity, desire, yes, but also patience, as though he treasured this fragile moment too much to shatter it. "You see," he murmured, his voice hushed. "The choice is yours." Her chest rose and fell quickly. "And if I choose to fall?" Adrian leaned just close enough for his words to ghost across her lips. "Then I will catch you." The nearness of him unraveled the last threads of her composure. Evelyn's hand slid higher, brushing against the edge of his collar. The heat of his presence seeped into her, drowning out every doubt. She had lived so long behind walls, but in this moment, the walls crumbled, leaving only the raw ache of desire and the fragile hope of surrender. The garden seemed to lean in with them, the roses sighing in the breeze, the lanterns swaying as if to witness. Evelyn closed her eyes for just a heartbeat, and when she opened them again, her fear had softened into daring. She stepped closer, the space between them gone now. Their bodies brushed lightly, her breath mingling with his. Adrian's restraint trembled at its edges, his hand finally lifting not to seize, but to rest gently against her back, a touch so careful it felt like a question. Evelyn did not pull away. Her voice was a whisper, fragile yet certain. "Then let temptation have me." The words hung in the pavilion, sealing her choice. Adrian's control fractured at last, though not with force, with reverence. He bent closer, his forehead brushing hers, their breaths tangled, the world shrinking until nothing remained but them and the night's promise. The moment was fragile, the edge of surrender, the first crack of dawn in a life long hidden in shadow. Evelyn's heart no longer fought against temptation, it leaned into it, hungry for what lay ahead. And in the hush of the garden pavilion, temptation finally reached out its hand. The night wrapped around the garden pavilion like a velvet cloak, hiding the world beyond the hedges. Evelyn stood in the center of it, her body pressed close to Adrian's, her heart trembling yet steadying with each breath she shared with him. She had spoken the words she never thought she would: let temptation have me, and now the air between them felt like fire waiting to ignite. Adrian's hand rested gently at her back, his restraint holding even as desire sharpened in his eyes. He brushed his forehead against hers, slow, reverent, as though memorizing the shape of her. The quiet intimacy unraveled her defenses more than any bold gesture could have. "You are certain?" he whispered, his voice deep and careful. Evelyn drew in a shaky breath. Her old self, the one ruled by hesitation, by duty, by the fear of impropriety, wanted to retreat. But the woman who had stepped forward, who had dared to brush his sleeve, who had admitted the pull she felt, refused to let that fear win. "Yes," she breathed. Adrian closed his eyes briefly, as if steadying himself against the weight of her answer. When he opened them again, his gaze carried both intensity and tenderness. His hand traced slowly upward, brushing the curve of her shoulder before resting against her neck. The warmth of his touch sent shivers down her spine, awakening something long buried. Evelyn tilted her head instinctively, her lips parted in anticipation. The lantern swayed above them, casting golden light across his face, across hers, as though the night itself blessed the moment. When his mouth finally met hers, it was not the fierce claiming she had feared, nor the careless brush she had expected. It was deliberate, deep, a kiss that spoke of reverence and hunger woven together. Evelyn's knees weakened, but Adrian's arm steadied her, holding her close as though she were the most precious thing he had ever touched. Her fingers clutched at his coat, pulling him nearer. Years of restraint melted from her in that single act. The kiss deepened, no longer cautious but filled with the raw honesty of desire released. Evelyn's heart raced wildly, yet it no longer frightened her, it exhilarated her. When at last they pulled apart, both breathless, she looked up at him with wide, searching eyes. "What are we doing?" she asked, though her voice carried no regret. Adrian brushed a thumb across her cheek, his touch tender. "We are being honest. At last." His answer struck her more deeply than she expected. How many years had she hidden her truth, smiling politely, burying every spark of longing beneath layers of composure? Now, here in the garden pavilion, she felt more alive in one night than she had in all those years combined. Adrian leaned close again, his lips near her ear. "The fire you hold inside, you've denied it too long. Let it burn, Evelyn. Just tonight, let it burn." Her body shivered at his words, at the way they stirred every nerve awake. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to feel the warmth of his hand at her waist, the rhythm of his breath against her skin, the safety and danger combined in his presence. Her voice was low, nearly lost in the sound of rustling leaves. "I don't want tonight to end." "Then don't let it," he murmured, his tone thick with promise. Their mouths found each other again, the kiss urgent now, carrying all the tension they had held back. Evelyn pressed closer, her hand sliding up his chest, her touch more daring than she believed herself capable of. Adrian's control frayed at the edges, his fingers threading into her hair as he held her to him. The pavilion seemed to vanish around them, the lantern light fading into nothing but warmth and shadows. Evelyn no longer thought of tomorrow, nor of consequences. For once, she lived in the raw pulse of now. When their lips parted again, Adrian rested his forehead against hers, both of them breathless. "Evelyn," he whispered, her name carrying both reverence and desire. She smiled faintly, her voice shaking but certain. "I was afraid of temptation. But now I see, it was never my enemy." Adrian's answering smile was soft, his eyes alight. "No. It was always your truth, waiting for you to claim it." And in that moment, Evelyn realized the garden pavilion was no longer a place of secrecy. It had become a sanctuary, where she had found not just temptation, but herself. The lanterns above swayed in the soft night breeze, casting golden patterns across the pavilion floor. Evelyn's skin still tingled from the intensity of their earlier embrace, her pulse echoing in rhythm with the gentle rustle of the leaves. Adrian stood close, his body angled toward hers, the quiet hum of the night wrapping them in a cocoon of anticipation. "You're trembling again," Adrian murmured, his voice low, not teasing but filled with quiet concern. "I can't help it," Evelyn admitted, her gaze flicking to his. "I didn't realize. I could feel so much at once." Adrian's hand traced lightly along her arm, sending shivers down her spine. "It's the fire within you," he whispered. "You've denied it for too long. Now it wants release, and there's nothing wrong with that. Evelyn's breath caught. The words were simple, yet they struck deep, unraveling the last threads of caution she had left. Her fingers moved to his chest, brushing the fabric of his coat, feeling the warmth beneath. She realized that every nerve in her body was awake, every inch of her attuned to him, to the moment, to the night. "Adrian," she whispered, leaning closer, I don't know where this ends." "Then let's not think of an ending," he replied, his forehead brushing hers. "Tonight is about the moment, nothing more, nothing less." Her lips parted, drawn to him again, and Adrian didn't hesitate this time. He kissed her with a careful urgency, slow and deliberate at first, then deeper as the fire between them ignited. Evelyn pressed closer, her hands threading through his hair, tracing the line of his jaw, feeling the taut muscles beneath his coat. Every touch, every brush of skin against skin, was a spark that made her heart soar. The night around them seemed to lean closer, the roses swaying in a silent rhythm, the lanterns casting shadows that danced along the pavilion walls. Evelyn's body was alive with sensation, every nerve awakened by proximity, by touch, by the heat of their closeness. She felt a delicious tension, an electric pull that both frightened and thrilled her. Adrian's hands moved to her waist, his fingers brushing along the curve of her back, grounding her even as the desire between them surged. His eyes held hers, dark and intense, filled with something beyond desire, admiration, awe, and patience that made her ache even more. "You're daring me," she whispered, her lips barely grazing his. I've never felt like this before." "Neither have I," he admitted, voice husky. "But the danger, the risk, it's part of the thrill. The moment is ours, and only ours." Evelyn's breath came faster, her heartbeat hammering in her chest. She leaned closer, her lips brushing his neck, feeling the warmth of his skin, the rapid rise and fall of his breath. Adrian's hand lifted, cupping the back of her head, guiding her gently yet insistently, as if every movement was a careful question, every response a willing answer. The garden pavilion faded around them. There was no ceiling, no lanterns, no pond, only the two of them and the pulse of desire that bound them together. Evelyn's hands explored, tentative at first, then with growing confidence, tracing lines she had never dared to follow before. Adrian responded in kind, every touch, every caress an unspoken promise, a confession without words. "You're beautiful," he whispered against her lips, and the words struck her like a bolt of warmth straight to her core. "Not just for what I see, but for what I feel when I'm near you." Evelyn's eyes widened, a flush rising in her cheeks. I've never been told that like that," she admitted softly, the honesty raw and unguarded. "And I will tell you again," he murmured, pressing his forehead against hers. "Because it's the truth, and truth deserves to be spoken." The night stretched on, infinite and tender, filled with the quiet fire of discovery. Evelyn no longer feared her desire, she embraced it. The garden pavilion, with its shadows and lanterns, had become a sanctuary, a place where restraint gave way to the slow, deliberate uncovering of longing. And as their lips met again, closer, more urgent, Evelyn realized that she had stepped beyond hesitation. The fire inside her had awakened fully, and she was ready to see how far it could carry her. The night had grown deep, and the garden pavilion felt like a world apart from everything else. Lanterns swayed gently above them, casting flickering golden light on the roses and the carved wooden beams. Evelyn's body still hummed with the heat of desire, her pulse echoing the rhythm of the quiet night. She stood close to Adrian, their foreheads touching, breaths mingling, hearts racing in tandem. You've given yourself fully tonight, Adrian murmured, his voice low, steady, yet vibrating with emotion. Do you understand what that means? Evelyn swallowed, her lips trembling as she searched his eyes. I think so, she admitted softly. I've let go of fear, of hesitation. I've let myself feel everything. Adrian smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. And that is the courage that makes this night unforgettable. You've crossed a threshold, Evelyn. One that most never dare approach. She shivered at the intensity in his gaze, the warmth in his touch. His hand rested against her waist, grounding her even as desire surged through her. And if I cross further, she whispered, voice trembling with anticipation. Then I will meet you there, he replied, his lips brushing hers softly, deliberately. The kiss deepened gradually, a slow exploration, full of reverence and longing. Evelyn pressed into him, letting go entirely, surrendering to the fire that had been building since the moment she stepped into the pavilion. Her hands roamed, tentative at first, then with growing confidence, tracing the contours of his chest and shoulders. Every touch sparked a tremor through her, awakening sensations she had long kept locked away. Adrian responded in kind, his movements gentle yet insistent, as if he were learning her language through touch alone. Evelyn felt herself melting into him, every boundary dissolving under the weight of shared desire. She realized with a rush that the garden pavilion was no longer merely a place, it had become an extension of their connection, a sacred space where longing could be expressed without fear or shame. The lanterns flickered above, casting dancing shadows across their bodies, highlighting the closeness between them. The scent of roses wrapped around them, intoxicating and sweet, blending with the warmth of their skin and the heady pull of temptation. Evelyn's breath came in shallow, uneven gasps, matching the rhythm of her racing heart. Adrian's lips found hers again, slow, soft, and then deeper, urgent yet tender. Every kiss, every brush of skin against skin, was a conversation, a confession, a surrender. Evelyn's hands threaded through his hair, holding him close, feeling the tension of desire and the steadiness of care beneath it. You are extraordinary, Adrian whispered against her lips, his voice hoarse with emotion. I've waited for this, for you, more than I ever thought possible. Evelyn's chest rose and fell rapidly. I feel the same, she murmured. I've never known anything like this. He smiled, brushing a thumb across her cheek, his eyes holding hers in a gaze that seemed to stretch beyond time. Then let's not hold back. Let the night be ours. Let the fire burn fully. And so she did. Evelyn leaned into the moment, letting desire and anticipation guide her every move. She felt the world shrink until it was only the two of them, the lanterns, the roses, and the heady scent of night. She surrendered fully, allowing the connection, the passion, and the thrill to sweep over her without restraint. The night seemed endless, a perfect expanse of heat, whispers, and shared breaths. Every kiss, every gentle touch, spoke of trust, surrender, and unspoken promises. Evelyn realized she had never felt so alive, so seen, so entirely present. As the first hints of dawn approached, soft light brushing the edges of the horizon, they finally pulled apart slightly, foreheads resting together, bodies still pressed close. Their breaths mingled, heavy yet steady, the intensity of the night settling into a warm, lingering glow. Evelyn's lips curved into a tired but blissful smile. I never imagined anything like this, she admitted softly. Adrian's eyes shone with quiet triumph and tenderness. Neither did I, he whispered. But now we have it, and it is ours forever, marked by this night, this pavilion, this fire. In the hush of the garden pavilion, surrounded by swaying lanterns and the scent of roses, Evelyn understood that temptation had not been her enemy. It had been a doorway, a chance to discover herself and embrace the desire she had long hidden. And in surrendering, she had found something far greater than passion. She had found courage, freedom, and the intoxicating thrill of living fully. The garden pavilion had transformed from a place of secrecy into a place of revelation, and Evelyn knew that the night and Adrian would remain etched in her memory forever.